Hi, and welcome back for this Q&A with writers and creators of industry, Mickey Down, Konrad K, directors Tinge Krishnan and Ed Lilly, and exec producer David P. Davis. Hi, everyone. So Mickey and Konrad, let's start with you. Perhaps you could tell us where the idea for this series came from.
Well, Konrad and I have a background in finance, having worked in it very momentarily after we left university. And it was actually the first thing we ever wrote together or tried to write together was set in this world. And that was more of a sort of cathartic exercise in trying to sort of expel the demons that we'd amassed while working in it. And we always thought, you know, there's a load of things set in this world and they're all quite derivative of each other. And it was a world that we were really interested in, but we never really thought would really have resonance for the sort of a wider audience. We were working with Bad Wolf, who were the producers of the show, on another project. And Jane Tranter, who's the founder and CEO of Bad Wolf, found out that she had two people who had used to work in finance working on another project. And she said that she wanted to bring us in, and we had a meeting with her. And she said, have you ever thought about writing in this world? And for the same reasons that I just gave, we said that we sort of thought about it and then dismissed it. And she thought, well, have you ever thought about writing it from a sort of authored, authentic perspective, based sort of on your own experiences? And that sort of opened up the way that we've actually done industry, which is the sort of, instead of the sort of, you know, bottom down look at the industry, which is usually the purview of things like Wall Street and margin call and things like that. We've looked in from the bottom up, whereas, you know, we've looked at the young people going to it, and at its center, it's really a show about people leaving university and going into a workplace for the first time.
The thing about it is, it sounds like a bit of a cliche to say this, but like we never really think of this show as a finance show. It's like, it's obviously, our favorite things about the best HBO series that we sort of grew up loving was this idea that they always talk about, which is kind of like, they talk about confident subcultures. So like if you present a world that you've actually experienced and lived in, you can sort of render it in a way that like most writers would struggle to without years of research. So it was kind of like, well, you know, me and Mickey have had real, you know, years of experience in this world. And we were kind of thinking like, if you kind of have to treat the audience with a lot of respect, I think, and you kind of basically have to say to them, like, we're going to present this world to you. It's going to be very dense in the detail. There's going to be a lot of jargon, but we're also come from that school of thinking that like audiences are far more intelligent than you give them credit for. And they're always ahead of you. Like even people who aren't particularly TV literate, like they're always one step ahead of you. So it was about kind of presenting this world. But then the access point for us was like, well, this can't be a finance show. It has to be a character-led drama. Like there are so many derivatives is the wrong word because it sounds a bit pejorative, but I mean more that a lot of the storytelling can be like, okay, you're setting something in this world, so it has to be nefarious. It has to be about people with like a lack of a moral code, and it has to be about some huge story pyrotechnics. Like someone has to be doing some insider trading, or someone's got to get arrested, or you got to tell like a Bernie Madoff story or something like that. And we were like, no, you got to find out who the characters are. You got to find out why anybody would want to do this job in the first place. And hopefully all of the story mechanics are always driven by character. Everything always comes from a place of like, who is this person? Why do they want this job? And then just trying to unpick the sort of the insecurities. What happens if you don't come from money and you aspire to have money? What happens if you come from privilege and you enter into a position of privilege? So it was all that kind of stuff, really.
And you know, speaking of privilege, I really, one of the things I loved about it was how it explores power dynamics in so many different ways across race, gender, and class, particularly.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing about. So my sort of abiding memory of the places I worked was. There's this kind of thing that you get told in the literature of financial institutions. I think it's a really interesting starting point for a TV show, which is you may all come from different places, and this is the purest meritocracy you're ever going to experience, because you're gonna come in as a graduate. You're going to start on exactly the same position on the racing line as it was, and then everything is up to you. So like the firing gun goes, and you're going to be evaluated purely on your own performance, your sort of P&L, whatever you make for the bank, and all this sort of stuff. But what was interesting for us is if you put 4 characters from widely different backgrounds, widely different expectations, widely different ambition levels. You put them on the same start line and you say, go. And you kind of, what we tried to unpick with this show is just show how each of those characters, totally contingent on where they end up, who their mentors are, what position they are in the hierarchy, their own attitudes to ambition and putting their foot forward, how everybody basically has a different ceiling. And for that was kind of where the drama was for us, because it was kind of like, well, you go in expecting a certain thing, and you know, there's so much. The other thing that we really wanted to hit in the show actually was just like the role that mentors play in careers, and like Harper and Yasmin, one of the main storylines of the whole, you know, the whole show is kind of anchored on their friendship for us. And one of the main things that we try to unpick is the idea that they go onto these different desks with vastly different sort of male figureheads above them, because these are super hierarchical institutions that they pretend not to be by kind of flattening the playing field by saying, you know, this is a trading floor. If you optically, it's totally flat. You're sat next to your two bosses, like everybody's the same. But the kind of luck of the draw of who you end up sitting next to, it can have as much impact on your career as your own, you know, whatever you're putting into it. So like, we really wanted to explore those dynamics, those kind of like, and they're not, you know, you don't have to necessarily make them sort of sexualized or juicier than they are in real life or soapy in any kind of way. We were just like, what are the real micro politics of those desks like? And we thought if we rendered them with enough detail and specificity and kind of, for want of a better term, authenticity, we thought people would just find that engaging whatever happens, because it's kind of, there's a kind of universality to it. It's like, it might be a bit of a black box of like, oh, this is finance, it's rarefied, everybody's keeping me out. When in fact, what we were trying to do as creators were like, actually, this workplace is like, it has universal aspects, which, you know, people who work in film, people who work in, you know, any kind of business will be like, okay, I know exactly what that relationship is because I had that exact relationship with my boss. I had that exact relationship with my junior. And what's interesting about these places, the tension in them for me that I find really interesting, and me and Mickey have talked about this a lot, is the tension between what you're sold on entry and the kind of credo of a firm like that. Because essentially what you have to say to people, you have to say, we're all in this together. This is a kind of almost like a universal enterprise. If the bank does well, then all of you do well. But that's actually, it's in exact antithesis to the way you're evaluated, which is like, how are you doing individually? And that tension between like, okay, we're friends, we're trying to make money for the bank, we're trying to make money for the desk, but actually in February, we're all going to be paid different amounts of money, and it's going to be totally contingent on how we performed. That kind of, that's a contradiction that like is just absolutely ripe with drama, because it's always like, it's always one face to one thing, one face to the other, one face to a senior person, one face to a junior person. So all of that stuff was all the stuff we were trying to do with the show, I guess.
Konrad, you and Mickey are relatively young writers, if I may say so, and the cast as well is also full of unknown faces. And also it's a very, very diverse cast. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the thought process that went into the casting.
From the very conception of this show, and when we were thinking about, you know, 2 years or 2 or 3 years before we actually started filming it, we always thought that we wanted an unknown cast, because it was really important for me and Konrad, as you mentioned before, to render this world totally authentically. And we didn't want you to be distracted by, you know, big people that you basically by people you recognized. In terms of like how young the cast is, though, shows that cast, you know, 28-year-olds in the past of 21-year-olds, I think, immediately shoot themselves in the foot, because like, I can't really, when I see a 28-year-old in a suit walking into a bank, I really think, okay, well, that person has their stuff together. Whereas like, when you go into those places, you are young, you are basically a baby in a suit, you look really young, and you look like you don't know what you're doing. And it was really important to basically be able to see that inexperience in the casting.
So just picking up on what Mickey was saying, the wonderful thing about this project was not only did it give new opportunities to youthful actors, but also behind the scenes, like we also gave a new chance to newer creatives. So we had new writers, EPs in Mickey and Konrad. I myself am a first-time EP on this project. Our directors, wonderful filmmakers, were newer to the TV space. Some had a couple of projects under their belt already. But what we were really looking for, rather than using the same old types of people, the same directors, the same writers, the same cast, like we actually wanted to use this show as an opportunity to maybe find the filmmakers, the TV makers, the actors of the future that could hopefully help to shape the TV landscape for the years to come.
Yeah, I mean, I found my experience at working on the show was incredible. It was such a fresh atmosphere. There was such like diversity and like really, really exciting, and like there was a whole fresh, the whole atmosphere and vibe was really alive. It was really creative. It was like really kind of collegiate. Like, you know, there was like a real, you know, like all the directors would chat to each other. We'd chat to Mickey and Konrad all the time. We'd throw ideas around all the time. And, you know, for me as a woman of colour, a director of colour, coming into an atmosphere where your, you know, your EPs and your writers are diverse, you know, and there was lots of women as well, and there's more diversity behind the camera. It just felt like a really alive and invigorating and a very, it like felt for me at the cutting edge of contemporary TV making. It was really exciting and really fun.
I'd love to pick up on your mention of the diversity. You know, it's a really, really inclusive cast across the board, which is something we don't necessarily associate with the depictions of the world of finance that we have usually seen.
Well, that's what I find really exciting at script level. That was one of the things that drew me really strongly to the project, was I could feel a world that I recognise, and I could feel a London that I recognise, and I felt like a demographic that was really recognisable, and the dynamics of the UK class system, because I'd seen a lot of finance-based drama. You know, you've got things like The Big Short. But what I hadn't seen before was what happens when it's in the UK. And the UK, what distinguishes the UK from the US is this very strong entrenched class system. And I just loved the way that Mickey and Konrad played with it. And then you had the character of Harper, who's coming in from the States, where ethnicity is the real issue in terms of, you know, in terms of like, you know, finding one's way forward in a world. And then she kind of like, you know, it's that it was just this incredible interface between two worlds that look similar on, you know, in many ways, but are actually really different as well. And I just found that the way that Mickey and Konrad had drawn and shaped that world felt really organic and really authentic. And, you know, also like the characters weren't all likable. And, you know, I felt that, well, that's probably the wrong word. The characters were doing unlikable things a lot of the time, but I really felt for them. And what I felt was in the DNA of the script was the wound that drives ambition. And every character had a wound, and they had a yearnings, and they were trying to be happy. And I cared for all the characters, no matter what they were doing. I cared for them, and I just felt that was it. That was really exciting.
One of the great things about Mickey and Konrad's writing, just picking up on what Tinge is saying there, is like they often subvert expectation, but it doesn't ever feel like it's for a tokenistic purpose. It's always, the question is always like, just because she's a woman, it doesn't mean she can't do this. Just because she's black, it doesn't mean she wouldn't have voted for a Republican president. You know, it's like, these are the questions that we're always asking, and we're trying to, they peel back layers of character, and it just makes the piece so engaging. I mean, I think earlier Konrad said that it was a character piece first, rather than a piece about banking. And that is what we love about this project, I think, over anything else, really, is the wonderful characters that have been drawn, and they are diverse in a real way.
Ed, I'd love to bring you into the conversation here, and perhaps you and Tinge can talk a little bit about the creative approach as directors. You know, you and Tinge and Lena Dunham have directed the episodes that we watched today. How did you work as directors to find a sort of unifying style across those different episodes that you all directed?
Yeah, so when I came onto the project, what I noticed was that it was incredibly well cast, having gone through block one with Lena. And then when I came on, Tinge was just about to start shooting on episodes 2 and 3. And so, you know, as a team, we all had discussions about the style that Lena had set in 1, how Tinge was picking that up, how we were developing it. You know, when I walked onto the project, the trading floor was huge. Like the scale of the floor that they built in the studio at Badwell was just immense. And it was just a really fun but complicated challenge to shoot various characters all sat at desks behind 6 screens. You know, logistically and style-wise, it's quite a difficult thing to do. But we just had lots of conversations, and actually I knew from Tinge's previous work that mine and her styles aligned quite well anyway. So it wasn't too big an issue moving through the episodes, you know. And then when Tinge picked up episode 6 and I went on to do 8, I think by the time, you know, the season really hits mid-season into the end of the season, it's really found its style, its look. It's kind of just developed over the season, like most shows do in the first season.
You know, the conversation, I mean, Lena as a first director was really great to work with, in the sense that, you know, she had this vision, and you know that had been developed with Mickey and Konrad, and you know what we were given was basically there was lots of elements of The Big Short, and essentially it wanted to be the antithesis of Wolf of Wall Street, so it was like anti-glamorization. And that was a really strong brief and a liberating brief to work with. And she was really like, you know, do what you want as directors. You know, we could just kind of feel the flow. It was really undictatorial. And, you know, so we could all jam from there. It was just like a big jam, really. And with the main thing being, we're not glamorizing, we're representing, and, you know, we're enhancing, but it's not about the glamour.
If I can just jump in on this really quickly, I think what was really impressive about all the directors' work on the show, and a lot to do with finding the kind of voice of the show in the edit as well, was you very rarely get shows which I in my opinion, have a kind of kinetic, propulsive watchability and energy, and also a human warmth to them. It's either you kind of make the trade-off between the two things. You're either watching two-dimensional characters go through plot at 100 miles an hour, or you're watching three-dimensional characters, you know, sit in a bar and talk about their feelings. I feel like the directors did a really good job of making our scripts very watchable, very propulsive, but also reminding you that these were actual human beings going through these experiences. So I think it was a really nice balance of those two things.
I also really loved the series' really frank approach to sex and nudity. Was that something that Konrad and Mickey, you wrote into the script, or was that something that Tinge, Ed and Lena as directors brought to the piece?
It was something that was there at script stage, but that was definitely brought out by the direction. It was really important for us for the sex scenes to be frank and to not be sort of, when we were pitching this and when we were talking to the directors, when we were first meeting them, we said we basically want the sex scenes to be as if the camera is basically being left there, and with no sort of languid long shots, no sort of like over centralization of stuff. And also it was important for us that I think there's been a move towards quite funny, playful, slightly dorky sex scenes, which we didn't really want to have in our show. We just wanted the sex to be sexy and to be central and good, but also to be incredibly realistic and to be frank. So yeah, it was there, but it was definitely brought out by the directors.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously the cast played a massive role in that as well, because you know, young cast coming onto a new show, some of these scenes are quite difficult, quite technical, quite daunting. And so we had, you know, a big process involving intimacy coordinators, you know, a lot of storyboarding, a lot of communication. So by the time we got onto set and we were shooting these quite complex sex scenes, everyone knew what they were doing and what we were trying to achieve. And, you know, through the edit, the sex scenes, you know, are very realistic. There's often not music on them. You know, we often sit in the wide shots rather than cutting around too quickly in the close-ups. I just think it all leads to a really, just a grounded kind of exploration of identity and sex and gender.
Yeah, I think, you know, it was, the sex scenes were really co-shaped, you know, with Mickey and Konrad and the full team. And what was really great about working with Mickey and Konrad was their awareness of male gaze and their wanting to not have those elements in it. And so I think that kind of vision, you know, with everyone and with David and you know, also we had Ellen on the editorial team, it meant that the process of working with the intimacy coordinator kind of was wrapped up in the storytelling, and it unfolded as we went through the process. It forced us to interrogate, you know, why we were doing scenes, why we were having certain moments, and the kind of sense of reality that Mickey and Konrad pushed for. I think, you know, has been for me, it's been a really, really I just found it a really creatively exciting unfolding in terms of representing sexuality on screen, you know.
Thank you so much. Congratulations on a brilliant, brilliant show. Industry is coming soon to the BBC.